Hey,
Hello, everyone. Glad you can join us tonight. What a day. A lot of information came out today. There's been a lot of coverage, and rightfully so, regarding the Idaho 4 and the murders of those innocent children and, you know, trying to go to college. And you have an animal such as this Kohberger. Um, and so we're going to be going into a lot of the uh, affidavit uh, as far as arrest that's led from everything that this man has done up to this point, from his studies uh, to his flight to Pennsylvania, his extradition back. There's a lot of information that this probable cause and when he became a suspect and when he was placed on the short list as far as being a person of interest. And it was far earlier than most people realized. And I thought it was earlier than what everybody was predicting, but I didn't know it was as soon. And it was actually a week before that they released certain information. But we'll get into all that shortly. Right now, we want to get into a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the coverage. We'll be doing the probable cause affidavit, of course. Um, to our mods and everything, of course, Nightbot's on. To everyone in chat, be respectful of each other and be respectful of the mods. And with that being said, we'll get in here. And as far as names and of persons of interest or witnesses or neighbors
victim.
or victims, victim shaming or anything, that's not tolerated. So let's not go that way. And if they get timed out, kicked out, whatever, you've been warned. So we're not going to be going into that part of it. And but anyway, we'll get into it. As always, prior to I give a little brief bio. This is Mrs. Steve, and I'm Steve. I'm retired law enforcement, 20 years of service. Started my career off working in the jail, road patrol, and then into investigations. Studied everything involved in many aspects of law enforcement, from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician, and worked all different types of cases from burglaries, thefts, up to homicides. I retired and found the true crime world and decided to become an ambassador for law enforcement, and here we are. And we got a lot of information tonight, so I'm not going to hang around on anyone on myself very long here. So, all right. As I was saying, we're looking at the murder of these four students, Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Zana, who lived at 1122, and that they were murdered. And so we're going to be looking at the offender, Mr. Kohberger here. And if you have any information on this case, notify law enforcement. They need those tips. If you have information as far as anything in victimologies of the for the victims, or if you have any information about the person named in the arrest warrant and then the probable cause affidavit, Kohberger here, then notify the proper authorities, because they can do something with that information, and they'll be taking tips all the way through this investigation and as we proceed. Tonight, as far as the probable cause of the affidavit, we're going to be looking more at how and if they've got the right guy. There's so much that's contained in that affidavit. It is limited. They didn't, cover everything, and I'm almost positive they have far more DNA, other evidence. But as far as the information contained in the probable cause affidavit, it is extremely powerful, and it shows that from the evidence presented to the judge to sign that probable cause affidavit, to issue that warrant, that they have the right guy, and it appears so. But as always, until he's found guilty by jury, he's presumed innocent until proven guilty. And so we'll look at that. And if you have any information that exonerates him, most certainly you need to pass that along. But we'll get into it that during the on December the 30th, the Moscow Police Department released that they had made an arrest regarding this, that on November 13th, 2022, that these 4 students were murdered within their residence at 1122 King Road. And so that started everything, and it's taken us and brought us to this date. And there's a lot of information out there. We start off that we have this filing within the courts dated December the 29th, 2022 at 2:52 p.m. Presented to the courts by Brett Payne. It tells you who he is. He has 4 years of as a qualified peace officer. And Corporal Payne, he was assisting members of the Idaho State Police, and was also being assisted by agents of the FBI. And that they took a call and went to the residence on King Road and entered into the residence. And they, of course, which is a crime scene. And there's a lot of information that when you get to these crime scenes, it's not what you see on the CSI shows. There's a lot of different types of security and briefings that go on. And within this affidavit, they did a great job, just like they did throughout this investigation. This is going to be a textbook case of how they took little things, brought them together through a database of suspects, vehicles, phone data, DNA, multiple state, multiple jurisdictions, and they linked all these separate data and found this individual. Absolutely remarkable. And like I said, it's something that's going to be reviewed and looked at, and something that they're going to be very proud of. And I'm sure there's going to be some mistakes that were made through this, but as I have discussed on my shows and other shows about when I thought that he might be a suspect and what information was out there and that what cameras may have picked him up, I never knew at that time that we were talking of how in depth they went. And I had made references to that, you know, if you compare it to the Boston bombing suspects and how they were able to track and find the individuals responsible through the camera systems contained within that city, that I thought it would be far easier with the Moscow, the Idaho 4 murders. And it turns out that they did a spectacular job, and they were able to do that exact copy of how to track an individual through all the security systems and the data, digital data out there. And like I said, there's no way within an hour and a half show you can get all that data and cover it. So tonight we're going to condense and just cover some highlights. But this officer says as he approached the room, he could see the body, and that it, of course, was on his body laying on the floor, and that she appeared to have suffered injuries from an edged weapon. And also in the room was, of course, identified Ethan. And that the medical examiner said it was caused by sharp force injuries, which we know now what it was. It was described. And so, of course, anytime you have some type of sharp instrument, those scenes in the can be extremely bloody. I mean, it's self-explanatory. And if you see some of the passive flows that were on the outside of the residence going down the wall, that appears to be the case. And so we had a lot of answers now that we know exactly where the victims were. And we were knocked off our feet when we found out where one of the witnesses was. Wasn't on the first floor. And there's going to be a lot of discussion about that and how fortunate she is to have survived that encounter. And what may have led to that, we'll be getting into another show on Saturday, and we'll be discussing that. We have a special guest coming on, which Mrs. Steve will introduce shortly. But he says as he entered the bedroom, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the DNA and on some of the, or specifically on this K-bar sheath. He said, I could see, now this is on the 3rd level. He's already left the Ethan and Zana on the second level. He's gone up to the third level, and he says that he able to see the two females in the single bed in the room. And beside one of them was a tan leather knife sheath lying next to Mulligan's right side. The sheath was later processed and had K-bar, USMC, and United States Marine Corps Eagle, Globe, and Anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it. And that they were able, from that sheath, to find a single source of a male DNA suspect file left on the button snap of the knife sheath. And I pulled out what a K-bar with a, as he described, a tan leather sheath that has all the insignia on it, all the way down to the K-bar, the anchors, and USMC stamp. And of course, this is just something I pulled off the internet. It has nothing. It's not the sheath that they from the crime scene, but it is so significant. And YT Grandma, $20. Thank you for your professionalism and expertise in these crimes. Thank you for your support. It means a lot to us. It's awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I was talking to Chris today from Mob Crew, and we were talking about the DNA, and I said, and we were discussing the DNA that they found that they put into the affidavit. And I said, and I was explaining to Chris, I said, I believe there's going to be far more DNA. This is something that links not just the crime scene to each victim and to the offender, but this links an individual to something that he brought to the crime scene that wasn't part of that crime scene. This is something that he that has his DNA on it, you know, that we know of. And right now, that's the only thing that we have to go on, is that we have no information yet that says that this knife was owned by anyone and that it was brought to the scene. And there's been a lot of speculation today, are criminals that stupid that they would leave something like that. I've seen billfolds where their driver's license left at crime scenes. So things happen. You get in a struggle, you're in the heat of battle. It could be in your pocket, be in the jacket. It could be clipped on somewhere, stuffed somewhere. Things fall, and of course, you leave things. We were fortunate that we were able to get this. Now, do I believe that there's other DNA within that residence? Absolutely. Not only from the sheath, but through the interactions of hair, fiber during that close quarter battle between these victims, especially the ones that have defensive wounds. And, you know, there's going to be speculations of who was first from what the witness said. And I agree. I was quite surprised that from the affidavit, it leads you to assume, as we get into it, that the victims, it started on the third floor where the first two girls were attacked and murdered, and then, of course, went downstairs to the second floor, which is odd to me, but I was looking at it from more of a tactical standpoint. But we don't know what the interactions, what happened on that second floor. We know that one of the witnesses on the second floor, she could hear it. And she also heard where another female voice said there's somebody in the house. And law enforcement hasn't clarified which person that they attribute that to. It could have been from the victims upstairs, or it could have been from the victims on the second floor. But they said they sent that sheath and to the lab, and they obtained DNA from it. And then through great police investigative and creating databases, that they had identified who they from noting vehicles, phone logs, and they had developed a suspect. And once they identified that suspect from these different databases that they had created, because that's what happens in investigations. You'll have a list of what information do we have, what phone data do we have. We get all the phone data from the cell towers coming in. You'll have that we went out and we conducted a video canvas, obtaining all the videos, camera systems throughout the area. And you'll have a list of what was seen within that video canvassing. And they narrowed it down to a certain vehicle. And of course, we now know that's a white Elantra. And so you have a list of all the Elantra owners. You got the list of all the phone data, and you have a witness that says, this is what the individual looks like. And once they had identified from the camera systems all the vehicles that had been in the area, and that was a great starting point, and law enforcement was able to create that database and narrow the focus into that Elantra. And of course, we have the lab work doing their DNA profile, which it didn't link anyone that was in the CODIS system as a suspect. And so now they know that we're going to have to go further and try to link into another database of, and it was speculated it was the genetic DNA profiles from some of the like, what is it, 23andMe and things like that, that's how they were able to develop it. It doesn't appear so. It appears that they had already, through narrowing the suspect field of the white Elantras in the area and through tracking that vehicle throughout the towns and on all these roads, through all the video systems that was analyzed, they knew where the car was going and they tracked it down to a certain area, which is absolutely phenomenal. And as they tracked it, they identified that this is going to be suspect vehicle number 1. And as you can read the affidavit, they tracked it throughout the communities, and there was multiple videos obtained, and as they tracked it, and they kept tracking it, and they sent off the information that once they got enough images of that vehicle, they sent it to the professional experts that they have a whole career that all they do is identify vehicles. And from that, we had the 2011, 2016 Elantra identified, which originally they said it was 2011, 2013, and then they included it as 2011, 2016. But the 2011, 2016 never came out. And I discussed that earlier with a creator, and my thoughts were this, that once it had been identified as 2011, 2013, law enforcement had already distinguished and probably identified a key person of interest, which turns out to be, it was going to be Kohberger. And at that point, that once they realized who he was and they started building that, they may have already collected enough cell tower phone data, and they already had enough of that vehicle data that they felt comfortable. And they didn't believe they had to up and refresh and tell the public at large that not only is it possibly a 2011 through 2013, but it may go all the way out to 2016. I believe they already had him as in the top 2, 3, 4, 5, or even as they got it here, suspect vehicle number 1. He may have instantly went up to the top of the list for a lot of reasons. And so they made a choice that this is going to be our guy. And so they never expanded the news briefs and allowed and told and informed the community, because once they had identified him and this suspect reaches a certain level of being the possible offender, he's put under constant surveillance. Not only the person himself, but we have a vehicle that we know that was there at the scene that brought him to the scene and took him from a scene that was extremely violent, that will have a lot of DNA, possibility of DNA contained within that vehicle. And so they're going to put that vehicle under surveillance for not only to know where he is, but also to protect that chain of evidence. And, you know, it's a great risk, but they were able to maintain and keep control of it. but exactly what was the time frame and timeline, I don't know. But we do know that at certain dates that they mentioned in here, such as on November the 25th, which is, almost 2 weeks prior to when they brought it out to the public. But on November 25th, they asked the area law enforcement agencies out there, um, to be checked and be on the lookout for this Elantra. And on November the 29th, WSU went through their list of registered vehicles that were registered at WSU and found a vehicle matching a description, and they were able to, which is this vehicle here, which came out later, but they were able to send an officer to that residence. And at the same day at 12:58, officer went to the resident where that vehicle was reported to possibly be located, and sure enough, there it is. And so now we have this vehicle, Washington tag, and they had the information, they had the photograph, and they looked at the photograph. The investigators, like I said, did an outstanding job. They took every clue that they had all the way down to his bushy eyebrows. I mean, we're talking some Perry Mason and Sherlock Holmes stuff here, and it's absolutely fascinating. And then they went and had all the phone data. And now some of this stuff, when I presented it, all of this was going on at the same time. And some information was coming in at different times. And it's hard to do a presentation and map it out. But I will map it out when we get into another section of the investigation in a future show. But the records start being supporting evidence of what they suspect, that they're able to get the data from it and long term. And did they have some partial information prior to December 23rd? Of course, I believe they did. But I just had to pick and choose certain parts of the affidavit because, I mean, you're looking at so many pages and so much information out there. But, and they talk about that from that information, they can tell that this individual had a long-term travel history from his residence to the residence on King Drive, and that they were done late in the evenings and early morning hours during their respective days. And so, which is huge. This individual, and like we discussed before, the victims may not have known of the relationship, but the offender, he most certainly knew his relationship. And they're able to show that he had a relationship, not only with that resident and that community, but routinely. I took this picture from one of the traffic stops. There's a phone, and I don't know whose phone this is. This could be the father's phone, or it could be the son's phone, Brian. I have no idea which phone it is, but they do have devices, and I just snipped that out of the traffic stop, and was at this point of that traffic stop. There's articles out there reporting that the FBI possibly wanted him stopped so they could take pictures of his hands and identify people within the vehicle and possibly do welfare checks of who is in the vehicle, see if there's any dangers or if anyone wishes to possibly exit the vehicle or relay some information that needed to be relayed. And so we don't know how true some of that reporting is, but it's highly suspicious that it was conducted. But anyway, that the FBI and law enforcement agencies and the investigators work in this case, they work and they build up all these links and all these threads focus Kohberger, linking him to the crime scene. And it's, like I said, you can just read through it, and it's just supporting evidence, page after page of all the reports, and bringing him back to that location. And let's see, I'm just trying to quick overview of this stuff. And then that he left and arrived back in another location early in the morning, 5:27. But there's something that happened, and that on November the 13th at approximately 9 a.m., he came back to Moscow, Idaho. And I think at that point he came back because he realized that he left something, and that something is going to be that sheath, that he probably still at that point had the murder weapon. And I'm just speculating here, but that he knows now, I have messed up on that. And I'm sure he may have been injured also. But when they were talking to the witnesses, and he also may or may not, and will never know from this witness, and exactly how she survived. Maybe Kohberger will at some point explain to us how this witness survived this encounter. After attacking the two victims upstairs, proceeding downstairs, if that's the order that they were attacked, and then engaging Ethan and Zana. Was he injured? Was he hurt? Did he break his knife? Or was he exhausted? Or what occurred that distracted him so much? Or did he see the witness standing there and he was in fear that she had called 911? Is that what his fear was? How long has she been here? Who has she contacted? Because time is not on their side. Once they're discovered criminals, a clock starts ticking. But whatever it was, fortunate enough for her that she was able to survive this encounter. But she describes that she hears noises upstairs, comes out of the room, doesn't see anything, hear noises that she hears someone say there's someone there, and then that she goes out, and that they're during this time period also the DoorDash delivery at 4 a.m. There's so much information coming in on this, but then that we have the video coming in that supports that there's sounds of struggle or a thump and a whimper, the dogs barking. Now, whose dog's barking, we don't know. The witness, or it was never included in the affidavit that the dog within the house was barking, but it could have been a dog outside that was barking, or it could have been the dog within the residence. And they may have not included that in the affidavit. Not all the information is going to be in the affidavit. This is just probable cause. They didn't throw the kitchen sink into the affidavit. They only threw what was necessary, and to make the community feel confident that they have the offender. And I believe that this is going to be the camera system that they're discussing that's just outside the residence that would have picked up the audio and whatever video in the area. But that same witness that had checked and heard the noises from upstairs and downstairs, she says that when she opened the door for the third time and looked out, she saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask. She describes him, and that he's not muscular, but he's athletically built, has bushy eyebrows, and that he walked right past her. Absolutely amazing. And like I said, that's going to be some severe trauma on her for a long time. And how she'll deal with it, we'll find out on Saturday when we speak to that expert. But and she says that he walked right past her, and law enforcement believes that that at that point he left the residence. So if we go by where she's describing here, that the first two victims were upstairs, second two were second floor, and she watched him exit. And at this point, for whatever reason, she's in shock, and we know what reason she's in shock. She just saw a strange individual. Does she know what was going on in the other rooms? We don't know, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, she encountered someone she knew that didn't belong there, and that fear put her in a state of shock. But then the investigators said that they processed the crime scene, and found a latent shoe print. And we had discussed that, and I've done some other forensic testing and showed how processing of evidence can detect and bring to light certain evidence and paths that an individuals take, and they were able to do so in this case. But anyway, when you take all that information, the DNA, the surveillance from all the cameras, the phone data, the footprint, the witness, it all brings that this information, the homicides occurred between 4 and 4:25. And like I said, tonight was just as quick as I could do to get this information in here, trying to show that, yes, they have the right guy. We have that DNA profile from a knife sheath that is consistent with what types of injuries was inflicted upon these victims. There's nothing in here that says that, and that's how they knew from the early reports of what type of weapon they were looking for. And hopefully they will find that weapon. But if you have any information from this, like I said, notify law enforcement, contact them, because Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana deserve justice. And whatever information we can get to make sure that happens, then we have to do. We have any questions?
You have a few.
All right.
So let me get in here. Let's see here. The first thing is, thank you, Charlie, for 3 months membership. We greatly appreciate that.
And also, with that in mind, I want to thank Copper Horse for last night during my first morning watch show of doing those gifted memberships. Thank you, Copper Horse. It means a lot to us.
All right, so let's get started here. First, well, not really first thing. First thing was Charlotte.
Yes.
But I hear that you told some stories last night about me.
Yes.
So do I need to go back and do the replay?
No. No, you don't need to. No. Thanks, guys.
Just know they're out there, right? Just know. All right, Dog Defender. Mr. Steve, I know you have talked about this before, but would you give some advice to the true crime community about the jumping in and pointing fingers, harassing people with no evidence, and bashing Ellie?
Well, sadly, we're in this that everybody wants justice, and it's so easy that when you look at these videos to point and say, well, that person's acting suspicious. Why would he say that? Why would he do that? And of course, there are certain situations, and you look at that and you say, yes, that was strange behavior for an individual. And but we have to remember, and that's how come I've always told everyone, we don't use names, we don't use initials, we don't point fingers, for the fact that if you're wrong, you have totally had an impact upon someone's life that can possibly change their path forever. And you wouldn't want someone pointing the finger at you just by you being in a certain position or a certain place or location on any given night where another crime occurred or victims walked past you and you didn't know them, but you glared at them or something, and someone instantly put you up to the forefront. Law enforcement, we have to give them credit. They stepped forward at the very early stages and said, these people are not involved. And why did they say that? And, you know, within the first few days, I think with the technologies and the DNA profiles that they had, that they were able to start eliminating these people extremely quickly, because we have a knife sheath. Day one, hour one, we have a knife sheath. I know that when those officers, investigators walked in that room and they saw that knife sheath laying on the bed next to a victim, Sensei became a YouTube member. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your support. That those crime scene technicians and the experts, they said, this has got to go to the lab. And that's one of the first things that gets transported and secured, documented, and we get it to the lab and we start those DNA profiles. The DNA abilities now is absolutely proved how valuable it is in this one case, and how quickly that they would be able to build that profile, look at it, was just within days. And when you look at, once they had identified a possible suspect that owned a vehicle, that they started sending out agents to trash bins. Now, was he the only one that owned a white Elantra in the state of Idaho that they may have went and collected their trash? It wouldn't surprise me that there's other families that went through it, that they'll never know that their child who was in the state of Idaho or Washington attending one of these courses or one of the schools, that by them attending that school, that their garbage was collected by federal agents and analyzed and ruled, no, that's not him. But once they hit that 99.99 whatever, then they had that golden egg, and that's what you look for in always. And I've spoken of that before. And that when you go in and work, process those crime scenes, you're looking for that golden egg. And in this case, it was that K-bar knife sheath.
Okay. I heard I needed some beauty sleep last night.
No, never.
Mm-hmm.
I never said beauty sleep. I
Right.
said you was sleeping.
Yeah, I was asleep. You forgot the word beauty. Okay. And from Molly at True Crime Web. Looking at the timeline of events of LE, looking at info stated in the PCA, appears they were very organized, systematic, etc., in my opinion. Do you have an opinion on it?
Absolutely. Like I said, somebody asked me last night, or not before last, on a scale of 1 to 10, I said 11. It is absolutely unbelievable. And when I read the affidavit, I was even Cynthia Gaines, $10. Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your support. That's awesome. But, when we were discussing the processes and that were taken and the measures taken and the investigative techniques, it came together on this case, and they didn't overlook. They did everything that should have been done, and it paid off. So, hats off to them. And I know there was other mistakes made. There's not any time on any investigation that certain things that don't occur, but they minimized them. And once they were on the track, they made the best practices with it.
Okay. I'm working on it almost.
Okay, that's right. Oh, man.
All right, let's see here. And Diana, if they have more DNA evidence, do you think they have his blood from the crime scene? Why did he leave the surviving roommate he saw alive?
Well, and that's...
I think I asked that question.
Yes, and I don't know if he was exhausted, he was hurt, or he thought that 911 was already on the way, and he didn't have time enough for another victim, and hopefully Ethan or Zana or had injured him at that point, and he was severely injured. That's what I'm hoping, and don't know, but that's what I'm hoping, and that's how come he left. But regardless, for whatever reason, she did survive it, and she'll be key in this prosecution. And it doesn't look good for the defendant. And so we have one offender. We don't have multiple offenders that we know of. That of all the times that she looked out her door, she didn't see anyone. And the one time that she did see someone that didn't belong, it was one offender.
And Diana said that I got a good one.
Uh-oh.
How hard I was working on the missing child database.
Yes. Thank you.
He owes you one, Diana. All right, let's see here. And Ray. Okay. And Purdue RN. Hello, Purdue RN. Mr. Steve, how many times have you stopped someone for following too close?
I've conducted thousands and thousands of traffic stops, even worked DUI task force for a year or so.
Now, you want some stories?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, yes. But probably 4 or 5 times. But when you're looking for a reason, and if the reports are true, then law enforcement, if you give them a mission and they know the importance of and they're requested, they'll follow through with whatever you tell them to do lawfully.
And Diana, I wonder if LE has more blood or if it's just the sheath did him in.
Oh, I'm in my personal opinion, from processing crime scenes similar to this, there's DNA there. It's just finding that DNA. And through the defensive wounds, and, you know, if he messed up enough, I know that he was wearing a mask. And so that in itself is interesting, because that does stop some of the abilities of some types of DNA transfer that can occur sometimes during fights. If you get wind knocked out of you, or as you're talking, and you might have some type of body fluid that transfer over to the victim that could identify you, such as saliva, and which is interesting just by itself. And we'll be looking at some of those behavior patterns and how he prepared for this crime, all the way back to that questionnaire that he created, and how forensically he was prepared to go there. Was he wearing gloves also? We really don't know at this time. But from his dress, from the way she's described him, it will be extremely interesting if they can identify exactly how prepared he was to limit his DNA transfer. But I'm still hoping that he was injured and scratched and or cut himself.
I hope he was bleeding.
I do too.
And Nancy, Mr. Steve, do you think the reason the suspect went back to the house later that morning was to recover the sheath left behind?
Absolutely. I think that he got home and at whatever point that he was gathering all of the evidence that linked him to the crime, or he was playing back in his mind, and he looked and he says, "Where's that sheath?" And what was his thought process? And was he going back to see if maybe he had dropped it, laid it on the car? Don't know. Was he going back to see what the activities from law enforcement or the neighbors were? There's a lot of reasons people return to a crime scene, and it's not always look for lost evidence. But in this case, since we have that, then there is that possibility. So we had to throw that into the pile. But he could have just been going back to see if they'd been discovered at that point, and which that will come back to haunt him.
We can hope.
Yes.
All right. And Joan, why couldn't they just get his DNA from his WSU apartment instead of having to go through trash at the parents' home?
They may have, and we don't know, but they may have. But it's far easier, that where was the trash bins? How often did he dispose of his trash? Where did he move? During that critical periods and times, and they may have collected it. We just don't know yet.
Right. And CJK, when did Brian go back?
It was mid-December, I believe, once his father came in, and then he was traveling back, driving. Are you talking about?
I think he's talking about when he went back the next day.
Oh, okay. Yes. All right. Yes. He went back the morning of the murders murders happened somewhere between 4 and shortly after, and he went back at 9 o'clock that morning. Okay. Yes. Yeah, there's so many went backs. He went back to the crime scene. He went back home, and then he was extradited back to Idaho.
There was lots of backs, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's several backs there.
Okay. All right, so that one's done. And Paper Chaser, I was wondering if he was surprised there weren't any news or police reports by 9 a.m., which is why he returned at that time.
And that could be. And like I said, he may have been going there to see if that was. And if he still had that, at whatever point, if he is the one that's responsible for these murders, and he knows what he took to that crime scene, and he knows that what his inventory of items when he got home or whenever he went to whatever staging area or safe ground that he was going to destroy or get rid of evidence or package them so that he can maintain security of them. But at some point he will realize that sheath is not there. And that will put his whole life into a whirlwind.
Okay. Okay, we got till 9:15, right?
Yeah, 9:15 or so. Yeah.
All right.
We got plenty of time.
All right, and
I'm sorry I had to rush through it and everything. I knew there's going to be a lot of questions on this.
but we'll be back on Saturday.
We'll be back on Saturday.
All right, and Purdue RN, why did she not?
Pull up. There you go.
There we go. Let's try that again. Why did she not call 911?
And like I said, I don't know, but we will be talking to someone that's extremely qualified to answer that. And I'm sure there's a certain from that, what was her title?
So I have set up for Saturday a special guest. We're going to have Dr. Susan, who is a retired clinical psychologist. She's going to give us some insights into the mind of Kohberger. Okay. Now, that should be interesting.
And I've spoken with her and as far as the profiling aspects of things. And so she'll be able to help us on that. So she'll be able to address that issue and a lot of other issues of not only the offender's life, but of the victim's lives also. So that's going to be Saturday night.
That's going to be fun.
It's going to be educational. May not be fun, but it will be educational.
All right. Okay.
Talking to those professionals and that are truly professionals and have that insight is absolutely amazing. When you talk to a professional in the medical field, such as Purdue, absolutely amazing of how they view the world and the information they have. And speaking with Dr. Susan, the exact same way. Absolutely amazing of the insights of human nature and things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And sort of kind of caught up.
You do better than I.
All right. And Dave, do you think he might have gone back to silence the other witness?
That would have been extremely high risk. But we're talking about an individual that's not thinks or does not think in the same manners of somebody reasonable. There may have been that possibility, but being daylight, knowing certain, he knew what he had done within that residence. I do think he was evaluating what were the risks. Can I go back in that residence? And there must have been enough movement or activity at that time that he decided not to.
And John Moore, I'm not hearing anything about the gap of time from when the killer was seen by the roommate and 11:58 or 11:58 when the police were called. Isn't that important?
Extremely important. And it is extremely odd. And, but like I said, uh, that will be explained at some point. We know nothing about the shock value of what happened. We don't know what occurred to her. We don't know anything about possibly of what went on with this witness and what she may have seen, what she may have heard, what she may have discovered at any point. She may have seen this guy come through. She may have been able to go to one of the rooms and went into shock. We don't have any idea. And that's how come it's just as easy to point and your finger at potential persons of interest and offenders. But we also have to be very protective of the witnesses. Not everyone acts and has the ability to do and react in a way that we think that we would, or what the movies show. People can go into shock, and they can go into shock for a lot of different things and reasons. And so we have to be very careful that we don't victimize someone to be unjustly judged. This girl is going to have to live with that the rest of her life, and I'll not play a part in that.
No doubt. And Mr. Steve, were you surprised by the narrow time frame of the crime? See, like 30 minutes or less from PCA. I was. Is that a leading? And then later on, she put question.
No, I figured that it probably was, 15, 20 minutes, but it could be out to 30 or 45 minutes. It was, like I said, I think, you can have victims' injuries from knives. I think the typical can be from the quickest bleed outs for possibly 2 to 3 minutes. It's very, in a knife fight, that's still a long time. But some injuries you may be able to survive and fight for 5-10 minutes, and we just don't know. But I'm not surprised that he would have been in the house up to 30 minutes. No.
And Cynthia, I wonder if her phone was in the living room or kitchen and she was too scared to go out of her room. Then maybe the girl from the ground floor came upstairs and she knew then she could come out.
Anything's possible. We don't know.
Well,
I mean,
she
could have been absolutely locked into her room and she was fearful. We just don't know. And we will know at some point. And, and there's going to be a lot made of that. But like I said, we have to be extremely careful. And if you hold that against me, you hold that against me. But I'm not going to be going after any of the victims or any of the witnesses.
All right. And then JW asked about the 8 hours to call, so we're going to skip over that one. And Purdue RN, Mr. Steve, we need a show on how to dial 911 if a perp is in the house, please.
All right. We will discuss that. My daughter and Mrs. Steve know exactly how to address that issue.
We do. We just say, Steve.
No, it's a little bit more than that, but yes.
It is a little bit more now. Okay. And Anna, report is the knife sheath was found on the bed next to a victim. Sounds like the suspect tried to return around 9 a.m. Did he just figure out he lost the sheath?
I think he figured out somewhere around 5 o'clock. He may have even figured out a little bit earlier because there's a lot of time frame from 4 to 5, and he's only a certain distance away. And we don't know. Law enforcement put a lot of information about tracking him through the neighborhoods. Did they put every bit of it there? Did they put all the DNA evidence they have in there? No, I believe that there's additional. And, but they did put enough in there to make sure that they had enough probable cause, and which is substantial. But I believe there's more. And he may have started realizing somewhere between 4 and 5 that I don't have that knife sheath. And he looked everywhere. He may have searched that car for an hour or two, and or whatever he did. And at some point he realized, I've got to go back and see if it's on the roadway somewhere. is one possibility. Or he was going back to see if the news or discovery, but or he was going back, maybe even contemplating going into the residence. We just don't know.
And Jennifer Rochelle, knife broke, maybe, Steve?
I had seen where some people were talking about that K-bar was some K-bar replicas of it would break. I don't know. I've never owned one of these, so I don't know, but it is possible.
And Ray Jones, a true K-bar would not break. So maybe a Chinese knockoff or something?
Yes, and appreciate
Good.
that. And like I said, I don't know. I don't own one of them. I'm going to.
Oh, yeah. Have no doubt. And Anna, a report somewhere said they got touch DNA off the button closure on the knife sheath. It was nice of the killer to leave it behind.
Absolutely, and that's within the affidavit. It's clearly stated that they were able to get that unknown male profile and match it to the father, and so that's what has brought us till today.
And the Bible group. Steve, in your opinion, will BCK be civil during the trial, or will he have to show his ego somehow?
No, I believe that he will be civil. We're talking about an individual, and a lot of people have said that, well, he's not, he's not the smartest man in the room. He's pretty intelligent, and he knows that what he's facing, and if he's guilty or not, and will be found out by that jury, and or he'll be judged by that jury, and so he'll have to act a certain way. Any other way of demeanor in the courts, it won't be allowed, regardless of what he wants to do.
And Elena, why do you think he went back and did not try to go back to the house?
He may have tried. I mean, we really don't know. I mean, they said that he returned at 9. I don't know if he parked, don't know if he walked, don't know if he went back earlier and they just didn't include it. We'll know that through discovery. There's a lot of potential things that he could have done and was prevented from doing. We just don't know yet.
And this is just for me.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know how he got in the house?
No.
They haven't said anything. Okay.
I think, it's been speculated, but we really don't know.
Okay.
I can tell you from typical way that we've always saw crime scenes, and I've seen offenders approach residences, or approach vehicles, approach businesses that they were going to rob. Whichever way they came in, that's the way they went back.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that witness said that he was walking from the room, walked past her room, is in that kitchen area, then of course he's going out that back door. And so if he's going that way, he knows the back door is open. That's the way he got in. So I would speculate that's the way he came in.
Okay. And Austin, does that type of sheath attach to the belt or to the pants?
It appears that it has a belt loop on it. I don't know if that belt loop on the back of it, and whatever kind I order, may or may not be the right type of sheath. But sometimes sheaths have additional buttons on it. Someone may own the knockoff brands, and I'm sure there's a lot of different makers of these sheaths, and they probably attach in several different ways, from clipping on to a belt loop.
Okay, so Sleuth has a question. Can
Sure.
I ask that? Okay, and then we're going to follow this one. I'm skipping a couple here, but Sleuth has dropped by, and he says, did he take his belt off, you think? Is that how he lost the sheath?
Well, we don't know what other gear he brought. We don't know if he had some type of tactical. We don't know what he was wearing. We don't know how he brought the knife in. Was he carrying it by hand, and he just unsheathed it? Did he have it tucked in the small of his back? Or, as you say, did he have the knife on his hip in some way during the struggles? Because there's a lot of different type of belt systems out there. And through his fantasies, how was he carrying that knife? And could a fastener of either a vest or his belt come undone and allow the knife to slip off of the belt or something? It's possible. We really just don't know yet. But just leaving the sheath right there beside the victim, that is extremely
awkward. I wonder, this is from Anna. I wonder if the door was wide open when he returned to the scene. Maybe he was just going to enter again and got spooked, and that's how the door got left open.
Don't know. That's it's been reported that on the bottom floor that the door was left open, and I don't know if that's been substantiated or not, but it's possible.
And Anne, could we look at the part of the PCA about the DNA? It's kind of oddly worded.
Yeah, it says the Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA suspect profile left on the button snap of the knife sheath. And then we go to the next part of the DNA. That on December the 27th, Pennsylvania agents recovered the trash from the Kohberger family residence located in Pennsylvania. That evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. On December 28th, the Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of suspect profile. At least 99.9998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. And so one in whatever that number would be. And so that's how they linked him. And that's enough to get the probable cause for the arrest warrant. And I don't know what, it would be odd, but it all makes sense to me right now.
And Anne, we've already done that one. Unstore that one. And CJK, if a phone isn't dead but turned off, can the cell company still tell where that phone is at or has been?
From the affidavit that, they said that there was a lack of service, loss of service during certain hours. And if that could have been included within the affidavit, I believe they would have included it. But how did he deactivate that phone? Where did he place that phone? And what was the movements with the phone? We just don't know, but they showed that there were blackout periods at certain times of when that phone wasn't located, and then it would come back online after the crime, which in and of itself tells a story.
These people get me. Okay, and Nancy, Steve, do you think this will go to trial?
I have mixed feelings on that. If he's a single offender, will he turn over and do like what BTK did? That would probably be best for the families. If the prosecution and the families agree to a certain outcome and he agrees, I'm hoping that is the case. Because, some of those trials can be brutal on the families. They're having to relive all that. But, I most certainly, whatever the families want done, if they would be willing to negotiate a deal and they agree to it, I always believe that the families have the last word and things like that.
And D. Mead, 51063, and I'm answering this one. Mrs. Steve, do you think he has a sociopath stare? And the answer is absolutely 100%. Did I not tell you?
I know.
It's the eyes,
She's
y'all.
one of those
It's
eyes
the
people.
eyes.
She's one of those eyes people. You can see where during the traffic stop that he did appear to be frustrated.
Quite agitated. And Anna, another thing never discussed is light source during the attack. Headlamp, nightlight, street lights.
So I understand. And the ambient light of what's there, and how well was it adjusted. And we know from the witness that she's able to see they had bushy eyebrows, and we just don't know, did they have hallway night lights? Did they have rooms that had night lights? We don't know what all the lighting sources, or did he bring his own light sources? Extremely possible. He was planning to commit this crime at a certain time and within a certain time frame. Then he could have prepared to bring a light source, because he is a organized killer.
Right, and I'm going to skip some because this is priceless. And Pamela, I'm using this. Agree them. Jeepers creepers, look at them peepers.
Yeah.
That's my new one. Thank you so much. I needed that today.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate that. Now he's just going to have to listen to this.
Yeah, I'm going to have to listen to that.
Yeah, sorry. Let's see here. And Lisa, could he have used a cell phone signal jammer? That seems like something he would do.
There's so many possibilities, but I think that's highly unlikely. I really do. I think that's highly unlikely.
Let's see here. And Mr. Steve, having now seen the PCA, when do you think LE narrowed down to suspect as prime?
Somewhere's around November 25th, 2022 at about 12:28 a.m. is where I'm going. That this officer says, oh, they asked me to look for a white Elantra, and here it is. And then he followed through with that, and he sent, and let's see, he went and asked another officer, Whitman, to go to that residence and see if there was a white Elantra matching that description. And I believe at that point, when this information was conveyed, that he got put on a short list. That, yes, we have a vehicle here that's occupied. And then they went back and they found video from a previous traffic stop, and even described the bushy eyebrows from that traffic stop, as you can see here. The photograph of Kohberger shows that he has bushy eyebrows, exactly what the witness stated that he had, that was prominent and stood out to her. So I think at that point, when the officer looked at the information, that's when it started clicking. And now they got to be able to go look at the phone data and look at that list and see where that individual was at certain times, and started comparing. And that's when he hit the short list.
And I have proof it's in the eyes, because Purdue RN said Mrs. Steve is 100% correct. It is the eyes. In healthcare, we can tell a lot by the patient's gaze and their eyes.
Okay.
Just good that way.
Yeah.
I can tell you if they got the, what was that thing called? Jeepers creepers, look at them people. Mm-hmm. I can tell. All right,
but that's when I think he went on the short list. Well, anyway, guys, I've got to go over to Christian's Behind the Crime Door show tonight. I'm going to be on there with Skip, and we'll be over there if y'all want to come over. I think they're talking about Delphi. And once again, I appreciate y'all being here. And Saturday night, we're going to have Dr. Susan here, And she's a clinical psychologist,
So,
retired.
Paper Chaser just asked a question.
Okay.
Paper Chaser, would Ellie have the witness look at the photo of BK?
Probably not the individual photo. They may have done a lineup, and there is certain risk factors in that because you have to get persons of, and we don't have a full face. She says that she's only looking at bushy eyebrows. It's one thing when you have all the facial features to go by. I would think it'd be highly unlikely that they would have just showed a group of eyebrows without other facial features. So I think it's unlikely, but great question.
Thank you, my mods. Couldn't do it without you.
But like I said, I'm going to go over to Kristen's show now and partake with that for a while. And I appreciate y'all being here. And I'll see y'all Saturday night, and we'll talk
with
to the
Dr.
professional.
Susan.
Dr. Susan.
Don't forget the thumbs up, too.
Yep.
Thanks, Molly.
And thank everyone that donates and supports us.
Love y'all.
Stay safe.